Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this virtual webinar. I'm Jason Landrum, a Senior Program Officer with the LenFest Ocean Program. For those of you who aren't yet familiar with our program, the LenFest Ocean Program is a grant-making program that funds ocean and coastal research projects that address the needs of stakeholders, rights holders, and decision makers. You can learn more about us and the projects we fund at www.lenfestocean.org. And while you're there, please sign up for our newsletter. Before we get started, I'd like to first offer a land acknowledgement. From the coast to the deep water and across boundaries and borders, we would like to acknowledge the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the indigenous peoples that have called these lands and waters home since time immemorial. Washington, D.C. sits on ancestral lands of the Anacostans, also documented as Nacotchtank, and the neighboring Piscataway and Pamunkey peoples. For today's webinar, we are honored to have James Nicorai, Therese Vicente, Henry Huntington, Megan Williams, Patty Chambers, Jeremy Davies, and John Ross to share the goals and ongoing progress of their project to advance inclusion of Indigenous knowledge and co-stewardship of Kuskokwim River salmon and federal marine fisheries management. My colleagues, Emily Knight, Vicki Bell, and Kayla Ripple will drop a link to their project in the chat. So please take a look at that resource if you haven't done so already. The project team will soon delve into the details of their project, but from the LenFest side, this project is part of a larger body of work that we are supporting in the Including Indigenous Knowledge and Ocean and Coastal Evidence-Based Decision-Making portfolio. As we all know, the traditional knowledge of Indigenous peoples has historically been overlooked, underappreciated, and underrepresented in decision-making processes, thereby impeding effective conservation and restoration of marine ecosystems. Earlier this year, we announced 7 grant awards through an open RFP process that we completed last year. And these projects represent a concerted effort to cultivate collaborative approaches that elevate and include the rich traditions, culture, and wisdom of Indigenous peoples in evidence-based decision-making in the United States and in Canada. We are dropping the link in the chat in case you'd like to read more about this portfolio topic and its funded projects. And alongside this webinar, there are more webinars likely to come. So please register for additional project webinars in this portfolio area. And my colleagues, again, will drop the link to register for these future webinars. For today's webinar, a few housekeeping rules to go over. All attendees are muted. With so many attendees, we want to make sure to minimize any audio disruptions during the event. At the end of the session, we will host a live Q&A at the end of the webinar. But if questions do arise during the webinar, we have a dedicated Q&A chat area. So please put your questions in that area. Please also do share resources or comments in the chat, and we will track those as well as the webinar progresses. With that, I'll pass it over to the project team to dive into the webinar. Therese and team, take it away.
Thanks, Jason. I appreciate it. And I just wonder, Patty, do you have that slide ready to share?
Therese, are you seeing that?
I'm not, but it might be showing to the public. What do we think?
I know this is the roadmap slide.
Okay. I am not seeing that on my end. Sorry, everybody. Should I just proceed?
Yeah, okay. Therese, we can see it, so everybody can see
okay.
the roadmap for today.
Well, sorry about that, everyone. Patty, if you actually wouldn't mind backing up a slide, I would appreciate that to the homepage. So thanks. And thanks everyone for coming on and wanting to learn more about our project to build equity for salmon and Indigenous knowledge in Alaska marine fishery management. I guess I've really been calling this the Knowledge of Kuskokwim Salmon and People Project, because that's what our goal has been, to document Indigenous residents' understandings of, relationships with, and management recommendations for Kuskokwim salmon. My name is Therese Vicente, and I am the Policy and Programs Director for the Kuskokwim River Intertribal Fish Commission, and I'm a co-lead PI for this project. The Kuskokwim Fish Commission represents the 33 tribes of the Kuskokwim River in salmon management, monitoring, and advocacy, and we're guided by Indigenous knowledge and values, as well as the best available Western science. So before we jumped into anything, I just wanted to introduce the entities that our Fish Commission partnered with in this project. One partner is the University of Alaska Damumta program. And the Damumta program is working to transform education, management, and research by addressing questions of equity and sustainability of life and relations in Alaska. Damumta is a Yupik and Sugpiaq word meaning all of us, and it's centered on elevating 14,000 plus years of Indigenous stewardship and bridging Indigenous and Western sciences to transform graduate education and research in fisheries and marine sciences. And we also partnered with the Ocean Conservancy, which is a nonprofit organization working to protect the ocean from today's greatest global challenges. Together with its Indigenous partners, OC creates evidence-based solutions for a healthy ocean and the wildlife and communities that depend on it. We do have several members of our project team online to present today, and our special guest, our elder advisor and one of our project knowledge holders, James Jahak Nikarai. But many hands made this work possible, so I just wanted to acknowledge all of our team members who are listed here. And now, Patty, thanks for the glitch. We could go to the roadmap slide now. And just wanted to give folks a quick overview of what we're planning to chat about today. So we're going to begin with an opening from Jahak, and then our project team that's here today is going to share more about why we pursued this work, how we did it, a high level what we found out, and some of our intended next steps. And I do just want to note from the outset that while we're really eager to share about our work with you, we're still in the process of finalizing everything and having our knowledge holders review and approve things for public sharing. So I guess just consider this a sneak peek of what's to come and really more of an overview of our project's methods and intent. And Patty, you could go to the next slide. And I would like to pass it off to my elder Jahak to offer some opening words on the Kuskokwim salmon way of life. And for those who can see the slides here, Jahak is pictured at right with his son-in-law Martin at their fish camp this last summer. So Jahak, can you, I think I see you online and you're muted. So maybe *6 to unmute, and then you could go ahead.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
There we go. Good morning, Jahak. Go ahead.
Good morning. This is James Nikarai. We had some salmon declining over the years, and I was asked to join the Intertribal Fish Commission as a member to start our journey with the fish and wildlife to co-manage the declining Chinook salmon that was going on down the Kuskokwim. And through that, we co-managed with Intertribal Fish Commission along with the Fish and Wildlife. The Intertribal Fish Commission came in with indigenous knowledge about how we can see if we can increase the numbers of our salmon that are returning to the Kuskokwim. And through our indigenous knowledge, I had my elder teacher, my uncle, that taught me a few things that we should be observing the return of the salmon and the number of salmon that could be returning. And the first thing he told me was when the salmon returns, instead of waiting, we should start our harvest with the first returning Chinooks that are going up the stream. And he told me the reason behind that was the first returning Chinooks are mostly males. So he said that's why our ancestors used to start collecting and harvesting Chinooks the moment they are starting to return. And after that, he told me it was the Chinooks that are coming in later are the females, and the males are upstream waiting for them to spawn. That's why I think that's why they had a high number of returns every year. And as we went along, the number started declining, and that was one of the reasons why Kuskokwim River Fish Commission was born, to conserve, to pass a message on to our tribe, to conserve and harvest the returning salmon so the numbers can come up slowly. And it did. But on the other hand, the harvest of our tribes were going against the interception of a returning salmon in the high seas. And the high seas interception was higher, much higher than the tribe's harvest for the winter use. That's what we've been trying to convey to the people, that conserving our salmon would have a high number of returns each year, and that has been working. But on the other hand, our salmon, the size of our salmon is getting smaller. We hardly get any bigger salmon. That was what we've been noticing past 10 years. And somehow, to my knowledge, to my thinking and my knowledge, is the salmon feed off the environment of the ocean floor, and the high sea fisheries rake the bottom of the sea, where they destroy the ecosystem of the growing salmon. And those are what I have been observing before I even became the member of the Intertribal Fish Commission. And those are the two main reasons why I think the salmon is declining: the destroying of the ecosystem and interception in our spawning grounds. It's actually happening on both ends. Those are the ones that we should be focusing on, or so our numbers can increase of the returning salmon, and that is one way we can save and protect our Chinook salmon from being extinct. Thank you for listening.
Goyana Jahak, thanks so much for opening us up and sharing more about the Fish Commission and how we came to be, and your role with us and your wisdom and thoughts about why the salmon are declining. I think you really, you gave a great overview for what we're going to dive more into in this webinar. So that was perfect. Thank you for being with us. I think, Patty, you could go to our next slide, and I'll transition over to my colleague Megan Williams, who will share a little bit more about the why behind our work.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon. Again, my name is Megan Williams, and I'm a fisheries scientist with Ocean Conservancy. We'd like to start today with a brief orientation to the Kuskokwim region of Alaska, stretching around 700 miles from interior Alaska to the Bering Sea. The Kuskokwim River is the largest free-flowing river in the United States, supporting both terrestrial and marine biodiversity. The Kuskokwim also supports the traditional subsistence ways of life of 36 indigenous Yupik, Dena'ina, Upper Kuskokwim Athabaskan, Degitan, and Dene communities. And Pacific salmon is really the lifeblood of these communities, providing for food security, culture and language, economy and trade, and overall health and well-being. Kuskokwim communities have traditionally sought and harvested primarily Chinook and chum salmon, and historically, 50% of all Chinook salmon harvested in Alaska subsistence fisheries were harvested within the Kuskokwim drainage. Slide, please. However, this really changed about 15 years ago, and Chinook salmon populations crashed dramatically and have not yet recovered to support the needs of Alaska Native fishers or of the ecosystem. And then in 2020, chum salmon stocks similarly collapsed and are showing only minimal signs of recovery. Recent declines in coho salmon have reinforced the multi-year, multi-species salmon disaster affronting communities and ecosystems in the Kuskokwim, as well as throughout western and interior Alaska. And declines in salmon populations have had catastrophic implications for tribal food sovereignty, culture, and traditional ways of life throughout the watershed. Slide, please. So, management structures for salmon are complex due to their life history and role as a sentinel species that really bridges terrestrial and marine ecosystems. And depending on life stage, salmon are managed by the state of Alaska, Department of Interior, the tribes, and/or NOAA Fisheries. And while our work in this project, and as you'll hear more about, really focuses on improving equity in federal marine fishery management, inequities in management structures exist across all management bodies. So specifically, Alaskan tribes are legally politically sovereign governments, yet they do not have equitable representation on management bodies or in decision making. And while Indigenous knowledge, or IK, is federally recognized as the best available science, it is still generally excluded from science platforms as well as analytical and policy frameworks. And fisheries management still really at its core prioritizes industrial resource extraction or profit-based fisheries over Indigenous values such as resource co-stewardship, resource relationships, and ecosystem connectivity. And for these reasons, specifically salmon declines in the context of inequity in fisheries management, we set out to find a pathway to make decision makers' conversations about bycatch and about salmon more comprehensive and inclusive of communities and Indigenous knowledge. And we initially did this through conceptual models. Slide. And as part of this work, we partnered with NOAA, Department of Fish and Game, USGS, and we included both Western science and Indigenous knowledge in the models and sought to identify salmon and community ecological drivers across the salmon life cycle. And so we have got just a screenshot of this here. We've also got a QR code if you want to dig a little bit deeper. But these models were published in NOAA Alaska Region's 2022 and 2023 Eastern Bering Sea Ecosystem Status Reports as part of the suite of information that is presented to the North Pacific Fishery Management Council each fall. And you know, at the end of the day, we learned a lot from this collaboration and the development of these models, and it really gave us a launching point for the work we will discuss here today. And this work has allowed us to take a much deeper dive on salmon, Indigenous knowledge, and management structures in the Kuskokwim. And with that, I'll hand it over to Therese.
Thanks, Megan. Yeah, so building from those realities that Megan shared, as well as, you know, just the voices from our elders, the knowledge that Jahuk shared. I mean, these things we've been hearing from people in the Kuskokwim for months, years, decades even. We decided to set out on this project and saw it as a real opportunity to pursue a new goal, which is to document knowledge holders' understandings of Kuskokwim salmon ecology and pair them with those of Western science in a co-production of knowledge approach, as well as to document Indigenous salmon relationships and traditional stewardship practices and recommendations for improving this sort of freshwater to marine, gravel to gravel salmon management. It's a lofty project goal we set, but we're really hopeful this work will both help preserve the traditions of Kuskokwim people, especially so they can be shared with future generations of Indigenous fishers, as well as to inform salmon management, especially in the oceans, so that it can become more equitable for our tribal communities on the Kuskokwim. So we kicked off this project with a spring workshop with the Kuskokwim Fish Commission's Executive Council, pictured here on this slide. It's been a stated goal of our governance body, our Executive Council, to document Indigenous knowledge. So we wanted to first work with them to review and direct our project plans. At this workshop, it was only a day, but they gave us some really great input on what sort of themes to interview knowledge holders about, as well as which communities to focus our efforts in. At this workshop, they really emphasized the need to communicate this sort of work that our project was pursuing with tribal youth from the region. You could go to the next slide, Patty. So then after that workshop in May, we jumped right into our fieldwork, which was primarily visiting communities, documenting Indigenous knowledge of salmon. This slide has a smattering of photos from our fieldwork, as well as some of the elders and knowledge holders we spoke with. And before beginning any of this, we first hired an intern, Kristen Maxey, who's pictured at that bottom left photo with me. She worked as our youth knowledge steward in this project, and we were really keen to hire an intern for this because first, our leaders have expressed their desire for the Fish Commission to engage more with Indigenous youth from our river. Like I said, they emphasized again at our spring workshop. And second, we thought this project would be a really great opportunity to employ a young person from the river and connect them with regional elders and the elders' wisdom about Kuskokwim ways of life. So this last summer, between June and August, we visited 7 communities from the headwaters of our river to the coast and interviewed 23 knowledge holders, most of whom were elders. And we held semi-structured interviews with everyone, meaning we had a set list of questions, but then added in follow-ups as conversation flowed, so we had a more natural dialogue. Some of the questions we asked folks were about their relationships with salmon, how they've been taught to respect and steward salmon throughout their lives, places on the Kuskokwim they associate with salmon, their observations of salmon ecology and changes in salmon abundance over their lifetime, their observations to know when salmon are coming and how abundant they might be. We call those natural indicators, as well as their observations on freshwaters to seas salmon management and how that management could be improved to help Kuskokwim salmon and people. We recorded each interview with an archival quality recording device, and after all of our field work, we transcribed all the interviews and used Atlas TI to code and organize them. We held the interviews in English, which is an important thing to note because some of our knowledge holders spoke in traditional languages, primarily Yuktun, the language of the Yupik people in the lower portions of our river. So for those interviews, because we wanted to make sure we had everything documented and transcribed, we worked with an interpreter to interpret the traditional languages for our transcripts. So this is the first time that our Kuskokwim Fish Commission has pursued Indigenous knowledge documentation like this. So I've been thinking a lot about what I've learned in this work and how that could inform any future projects or next steps for this project. For one, I've realized that summer is a great time to travel in the Kuskokwim because the weather is generally good for flying. We were even able to boat to some communities, and salmon was on everyone's mind since it was salmon season. So it made a lot of sense to do this work during the summer. However, this season is also a very busy time for people living a subsistence way of life. They're focused on harvesting from the land and the waters. So I've made a mental note that a lot of this work could be pursued in the slower fall and winter months as well. Secondly, I really wish we had video recorded our interviews. That was something Patty mentioned to me from the outset, and we didn't prioritize as much. And I really wish we had done that to have, along with the audio recordings of our knowledge holders and elders, video recordings of them speaking as well. So I'd prioritize that in a future project because I think it could be really powerful for sharing this knowledge, especially with youth from our region. And finally, most of the knowledge holders we interviewed solo, but I think it'd be really interesting to hold group interviews in the future, and especially multi-generational group interviews, so there'd be more youth present to hear the wisdom and knowledge shared, and for they as often burgeoning subsistence harvesters, they can share what they're learning as well. So that's a little bit about our interview process and methods, and I'll pass it off to my colleague John to share about our fall workshop.
Thanks, Therese. My name's John Ross. My Dena'ina name is Anushin. I'm from Kenai, Alaska, on Cook Inlet, and I live and work here on the land of the Dena'ina. And I'm Dena'ina Athabaskan, the director of Arctic Indigenous-led conservation for Ocean Conservancy. I've been here for 2 years. And first thing to say is it's been awesome for some of our staff at Ocean Conservancy to be able to work with the Kuskokwim River Intertribal Fish Commission and to help to implement this grant and project with the Lenfest Ocean program. So a bit about the fall workshop. It was held in November on the 13th and 14th in Bethel, which is a remote community in Alaska, which you have to fly to, of course, on the Kuskokwim River. And there were several staff from the Ocean Conservancy and 15 elders or so. There's a picture of them here on the slide that came in from all different parts of the river. And it was a snowy and blizzardy day, but it was a really special time with these knowledge holders and hearing their wisdom. Our purpose was really to share back with them about what we've heard and what we've learned so far from the spring workshop and from the interviews, and to share how the important and pertinent information is being used in the development of some of our work products, like the salmon life cycle indicator, like the mapping and river atlas, which you'll hear more about, the story map. And it was really awesome to hear. We shared what we're learning, but they continually shared throughout the meeting more and more of their wisdom, which was just incredible. And they were engaged throughout the entire time. It was really awesome. So this information will be used to help elevate Indigenous knowledge and help to create more equity in fisheries management. And I'll turn it over to Patty, and she can talk more about some of these work products.
Thanks, John. Oops, change slide. Good morning, afternoon. My name is Patty Chambers. I am the digital manager for Ocean Conservancy's Arctic and Northern Waters program. And I'm honored to be a part of this LenFest panel today and pleased to be a collaborator and advocate on this project. The fieldwork that Therese described earlier documented important ways of knowing that we felt would be served well within a story map platform. So ArcGIS Story Maps, for those who are not familiar, is a cloud-based platform that combines maps, text, multimedia content, and interactive features to create visual narratives. It integrates GIS capabilities with storytelling elements. And so we chose this platform because we thought it would be a powerful storytelling tool to bring data to life. And we felt it could do this by helping audiences visualize patterns and relationships that are meaningful in the region. That with enhanced engagement with multimedia and interactivity, it would capture the audience's attention and make it easier to communicate key messages. And also by combining spatial data with historical, social, and environmental context, it could help explain the where and the why behind the story of salmon and the people of the Kuskokwim. And story maps are also a really versatile tool that can be used across various domains, such as environmental studies, education, and management and planning. And finally, we felt that this type of visual interactive narrative could serve as a bridge between the interviews collected in the field and the younger audiences, which our advising elders indicated was a priority. Supported by this rationale, we invested our time and resources in building out a story map collection that contains 7 chapters, which you can see on the left of the screen here. And the chapters range in topics from the fish camp way of life and traditional teachings to understanding the Kuskokwim salmon life cycle and drivers of salmon declines. Each chapter is thematically titled. So it's thematically titled using a quote that's taken directly from the field recordings. And this is with the intent of placing the voices of the Kuskokwim River front and center. So highlighting some of the key features within the collection, we kick off each chapter in the collection with a signature audio sample and kind of employ this podcast look and feel as a teaser graphic as a way of enticing folks to listen to the audio. And Jason, if you would, can you play an example?
To what our salmon means life, it represents food and it's part of your culture. From our parents and grandparents' time, he said everything, practically everything, salmon, birds, and wildlife used to be lots in the early years.
Thanks. So that kicks off every chapter in the collection, and in addition, we also embedded audio samples from interviews throughout the story maps and featured a selection of interviews to deepen and enrich the connection with people of the Kuskokwim. We built a natural indicators calendar that uses visual, audio, and interactive elements to relay the knowledge holder information in the form of a talking card deck. So, for example, by selecting on a natural indicator category such as birds or insects or wind and weather, the users are presented with a card deck to see, to read, to hear about what it means for salmon and people on the Kuskokwim. We also included an interactive salmon life cycle that explores salmon health and pressure points that impact salmon abundance and declines. And finally, we included a series of traditional teachings passed down from the knowledge holders during the field recording. In the process of vetting the story maps and aligning the work at our fall workshop, we learned some important lessons from the constructive feedback of our advising knowledge holders. And as an example, reviewing the traditional teachings, our executive council advised us to reorder them so that they followed the natural order of salmon and people on the river. That is in the order of the fish camp way of life and the cycles of life on the river. And they also advised us on what was missing from the teachings. And for example, they added a powerful and poignant message of unity, which is a great way to conclude here. We work together. Every family member has a role. And with that, I'd like to again acknowledge how grateful I am for being a part of this important work, and I'll hand it to our mapping expert, Jeremy Davies.
Thanks, Patty. And hi, everyone. I'm just going on video briefly, just so you can put a face to the voice for this section. But my internet's been wonky, so I'm going to go back off now. But hello, everyone. And I guess I'll start with, my name is Jeremy, and I'm a conservation geographer at Ocean Conservancy. And I live and work and play on the traditional lands of the Coast Salish people in Bellingham, Washington. I'm going to sound like a broken record here and say I too am super grateful to be part of this important work, this great team, and to have had the opportunity to meet with and work with some of the people of the Kuskokwim River. It's been a great experience for me. So my role here today is to talk about some of the community-based mapping aspects of this project, starting with paper maps. Large and detailed wall maps, as shown on the left of this slide, were created and used to fuel discussions and to foster engagement at the first workshop, with the idea being that people love maps. And at the workshop, these maps did indeed serve to get people talking about where they live, fish, hunt, and generally harvest along the river and its tributaries. Excuse me. More detailed regional maps were created and used by field staff to collect information about points of significance during their community visits that Therese described, as shown on in the photos on the right. Using these detailed maps, knowledge holders were asked, looking at this map, what regions or areas do you associate with salmon? Be as specific or general as you feel comfortable with. The locations identified by the knowledge holders were marked on the maps, and then back in the office, information about each location, or point of significance as we call them, was transcribed from field notes and interview recordings, just as Therese mentioned earlier. These points of significance ranged from sites of family fish camps to species-specific spawning grounds to culturally significant areas and sites. Next slide, please, Patty. The locations marked on the paper maps shown on the left were then digitized via ArcGIS and populated with associated information from the interviews. Once digitized, we were able to add these points to digital mapping products, such as the points of significance viewer and editor shown on the right of this slide, as well as to use in print products. Transferring the information shared by the knowledge holders to this online platforms allows commission staff to maintain and share these data as needed for this project, and will allow participants from the region to view all the points of significance in relation to other geographic features, such as proximity to communities, other points of significance, important landmarks, jurisdictional or management boundaries like the national wildlife refuges, etc. It's really important to note here that some of the information we collected is sensitive and not meant to be shared, or certainly not ready to be shared at this point. We take data privacy and sovereignty really seriously, and with the ArcGIS online platform, we can control access to the data and attributes as needed. This is super important for our work. For example, some staff have full access to these data via internally shared web applications, while public-facing sites or apps that display these data will allow for limited access to site locations and the information shared with the knowledge holders, shared by the knowledge holders. Conversely, it's really important to note that knowledge holders do want some of this information shared, and this is indeed one of the drivers of this work, given how much Indigenous erasure occurs in colonial fisheries management settings. Next slide, please, Patty. At the second workshop, cross-regional small groups worked with project staff to review entries and adjust the placement of points and related information as needed via this web mapping application that you see. In the process of doing this, some new sites and information were added, and we will continue to use this app to refine and add points of significance via conversations with knowledge holders. In fact, one of the purposes of developing this web mapping application was to create a simple platform for commission staff to edit, add, and update points of significance down the road, or up and down the river in this case. And this workshop served as a good test of its functionality and utility. And next slide, Patty. At the end of this project, one of the map products will be a river atlas that captures and displays the information shared by knowledge holders. This and the next slide are just mock-ups of what the atlas might look like. I'm not going to show all the pages of the atlas here, but this slide illustrates what will be at its core, which is a series of indexed map tiles or map sheets that display the points of significance identified by the knowledge holders, Indigenous place names, hydrographic features, communities, and whatever other important geographic features are needed or desired to be displayed. The points of significance will be labeled with a unique identifier, and details about each of the points of significance shown on the adjacent map will be shown and listed on the facing page. It's our hope is that this hard copy atlas will serve as a valuable resource and hands-on tool that captures the knowledge, stories, and traditions shared by knowledge holders in a simple format that is accessible to all participants, their communities, and the commission staff. With that, I'm going to hand the baton over to Henry. And thanks for your time.
Well, thank you. I'm Henry Huntington, Arctic Science Director at Ocean Conservancy, and I will echo what everyone has said about the privilege and pleasure of working on this project. An important part of the project was to work with the Kuskokwim knowledge holders to identify policy and management recommendations to improve the well-being of salmon and salmon people. These were identified through interviews with knowledge holders as well as collectively and collaboratively during the fall workshop that John described. And we want to share some of the key themes that we heard from the people's recommendations. This is not an exhaustive list, as Therese mentioned in the introduction. We're sort of giving a few teasers and a few examples, but we'll do some further work on confirming what people want to say and making that available when we're ready. And this will echo some of the things that James explained in his introduction as well. So three main themes that I'd like to address. First, knowledge holders shared a need for improved access, equity, and action for some Kuskokwim salmon and people. For example, there was a big need for increasing the number of designated tribal seats at decision-making tables to strengthen tribal voices in these processes, and also to make fishery management meetings accessible to tribal people. So instead of holding them in Anchorage or Seattle, to have them in rural Alaska where people can more easily get to them. There's also a need for equity in sharing the burden of conservation among user groups, not just putting this on the backs of subsistence harvesters. Again, I refer to James's comments at the beginning about who's taking the most salmon and why. And also there was an expressed desire to see management action based on the Indigenous knowledge, testimony, and values shared by Indigenous peoples, and not just that of academic researchers or government agencies or extractive industries. The second big theme was emphasizing that knowledge holders emphasized was the need for increased communication and capacity for tribes to engage in fisheries management. These recommendations had two parts. First, management agencies should pursue consistent proactive communication and consultations with tribes about management decisions and impending actions that affect Indigenous ways of life. And second, at the same time, tribal entities like the Kuskokwim River Intertribal Fish Commission need to equip tribal people with information and knowledge about fisheries management bodies and decisions. They need to help prep the people who are testifying and making decisions on behalf of tribes with the information that they need. The third big theme that I'll mention today was the big desire to see ecosystem-wide stewardship of salmon, an approach that crosses the colonial management jurisdictions that divide up the river and the sea in many ways, and to take a rivers to seas salmon ecosystem approach that prioritizes collaboration and centers restoration efforts on taking care of salmon, not just managing them. Part of this ecosystem-wide stewardship means paying attention to habitat and food chain impacts from industrial commercial fishing and other extractive industries, as well as managing salmon in the marine environment with an ecosystem-wide marine to freshwater lens. And finally, very importantly, this stewardship is meant to be collaborative. Knowledge holders stress that it is important not to argue about fish, but to work together, tribes, agencies, industries, and researchers all together to restore salmon. Can't quite remember who I'm passing it to next, so Therese.
I think it is me. Thanks, Henry. This is Therese again. And I'll just close us out with, well, get us close to closing out with sharing some next steps. And Patty, I can't see if you've gone to the next slide or not, but you could head to that next step slide. So first, for our next steps, we're intending to get all the products that Patty and Jeremy and Henry just shared about in tip-top final draft shape. So then we could revisit all of our communities and our knowledge holders this winter and spring. And at those meetings, we'll go over the draft final products, show them how we've improved them since they last reviewed them at the fall workshop. And we'll hopefully get them finalized and discuss how folks might want them shared in their communities and more broadly. So after that, after those meetings, we'll hopefully share them however our knowledge holders want us to. We know we really want to prioritize sharing these things with our tribes, tribal youth. There's a question in our chat about sharing it with school districts, which is something that's come up as a way to get these resources into the hands of our young people. But we also do hope we could share some of this information with managers and funders, researchers, the public. So there's a wider collective of people who know about what's going on in the Kuskokwim and know the pathways forward that our knowledge holders have identified. So we're really leaving that up to our knowledge holders to let us know how much or how little of their knowledge they consent to be shared with the public. And then down the road, we're also hoping to publish a manuscript about this work and including the process behind it all. So more to come on that front. But Patty, you could head to the next slide. And to close us out, we just wanted to finish with another parting quote from one of our knowledge holders, Martin Andrew, who's Jahuk's relative. This is when we asked him about his hopes for the future. And here's what he shared in his interview this summer. And I think, Jason, you could play that audio.
Yep, I'll play it right now.
Thanks.
I believe it's very important to carry on the tradition of gathering subsistence food like this, right now where the activity of, fish camping, we're gathering salmon right now. And just the other day, we got to, we got to watch our middle grandson, Joy was teaching him how to fillet red salmon. And that grandson is six years old. And he was wanting to learn how to fillet red salmon. Joy taught him that the other day. And seeing those types of activities just warms my heart, and I hope that they continue on doing this activity and practice we've been doing for generations. That's what I hope for.
Thanks, Jason. And with that, we just want to say Koyana, Dogaden, Chinan, Jinan, thanks everyone for coming. And many thanks especially to Lenfest Ocean Program for funding this work and our wonderful Kuskokwim knowledge holders who are named here. So thanks. And if we have time for questions, I think we're happy to take any.
Excellent. Thanks, Therese, and thanks to the whole project team and your partners. What amazing work. And we're so proud to be and honored to be associated with this project. We've got one question in the Q&A section, but I wanted to reiterate to the remaining attendees that please put your questions in the Q&A section so that we can get to them during this session. The question that's there is, hi, my name is Courtney Parley. I live and work in the Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people, Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada. I work with Fisheries and Oceans Canada and was wondering how you address the ethics of collecting Indigenous knowledge. Did the communities you worked with have guidelines to follow? Were there ethics approvals required?
Yeah.
Anyone from the project team?
I can jump in. This is Therese. And if anyone has anything to add from our project team, please chime in after. But thanks, Courtney, for this question. It's a really good one and something we had a lot of dialogue about within our team and also with the Fish Commission's governance body as we began this work. What we ended up doing, because some tribes do have ethics approvals, I guess is how you said it, or kind of like knowledge documentation guidelines, research protocols. We adhered to those where they were present, but also not a lot of the tribes that we worked with had those. So it just it was really case by case. And I think generally what we did is we approached the tribes. We shared with all of our tribes about this work and invited any of them who are interested in being a part of it to let us know. If they wanted to nominate knowledge holders, to let us know. And so we got some feedback that way and worked with the tribes in that way. And then many members of our executive council are also tribal leadership as well. So they conferred with their tribes, we conferred with their tribes, and got recommendations for knowledge holders in their community from the tribes. So for this project as well, we had a consent form that all of our knowledge holders filled out. It's modeled on one I believe is used by the University of Alaska Fairbanks. It was shared with us from some of our DMUMTA fellows through DMUMTA's partnership in this project. So we had a consent form for everybody, and it included, our agreements to not share information before it's been reviewed. So just so folks know that the knowledge that was shared here today was consented to be shared as part of this webinar. And we also, stipulated like honorariums and who to contact, how the knowledge would be stored and protected, things like that. So that was kind of a jumble. I hope that answers your question. It really was pretty case by case. And so I don't know if everything that we did here in this region would apply to the region that you work on or that others might work on as well. I don't know if any of my colleagues have anything to share to that.
Great. Looks like it answered Courtney's question, and I'm not hearing any other panelists chiming in. I've got a question just to take moderator's privilege here. And the word hope kind of like comes through, this work and other work that I've been seeing lately. And I was wondering if the panel could share maybe some experiences, engagement, or stories, either through this work or other projects and engagement, has given you the most hope for the progress you're making to advance Indigenous agency and knowledge in federal salmon fisheries management in the Kuskokwim and surrounding regions. So if the panelists could think about that and share what they'd like to about what's giving them the most hope in terms of the experiences or stories or engagement through this project or others in terms of really elevating Indigenous knowledge and agency in this context.
I'm happy to kick us off on this, but that's a huge question. So I suspect the other panelists will have some more responses. But from my vantage point as a scientist, I think one of the things that really did inspire a lot of hope and optimism was the really great honor to be able to go to the communities, to meet the people face to face, the knowledge holders, to work with a great group of collaborators as well. So it was just it felt like a really strong and unified team. and then meeting the people who were really there to share the information for the greater good of salmon, for their communities. And they were there, they were working hard. They spent many hours talking with us and answering tough questions, looking at work products. And it was just such a privilege, and seeing that dedication, learning about the region more personally, being there and just the sort of opening my eyes to all of that experience was really, for me, it inspired a lot of hope.
Anyone else want to share?
Well, I guess I could chip in. This is Henry again. I've been working with research involving indigenous knowledge for over 30 years in Alaska, and I see a big trend that when I started, there were a few people who were receptive, but a lot of skepticism and a lot of people saying, "Well, why are you doing that?" Or, "Hey, you're just trying to take my research money away," or other things like that. And in fact, a lot of sort of lack of awareness among indigenous peoples. And we can, that's a much bigger topic, but I think the colonial legacy of being told that, your ways don't count and it's these other ways that matter and so on. A lot of people would, I'd say, "Oh, I want to talk to you about beluga whales," or whatever it might be. And they'd say, "Well, why do you want to talk to me?" And over time, I think that has really changed. So people are aware that what they know matters, what they know is important, what they know is hard won from, a lifetime and generations of existing in the environment and stewarding the environment and paying attention and learning. And I think we see a big change in at least the rhetoric in the research and management worlds. Now, it's not to say everything's great. As we heard in the management part, as we heard from James and from Therese, there's a lot of work to be done to get people a more role in actually making the decisions and having an influence rather than just contributing knowledge. But I think we're headed in the right direction, and I just commend the Kuskokwim River Intertribal Fish Commission for taking this on and doing this project themselves rather than sort of waiting for somebody else to come in and do things from outside the region. Thank you.
Thanks, Henry.
And this is Therese. I don't, I guess I don't mean to hog the mic, but I think it's such a good question. And I think the emphasis that our knowledge holders placed on youth and like wanting young people, young indigenous people from the region, to know this knowledge, know the importance of salmon, know the ways in which they can elevate their voices to improve salmon management. I think that really stood out to me. And like what our knowledge holder Martin shared, that was shared with you all at the end about his hope that, this way of life can continue. I mean, that's between the elders sharing with the youth. So I think that gave me a lot of hope, because this way of life there's a lot of changes, but because of colonization, because of different fisheries managements, things like that, but it's very resilient, and people are continuing to practice this way of life and wanting to practice it too. So that gives me a lot of hope. And I think Jahak is still on the line. I don't know, James, if you want to share anything, you're welcome to. I think you might have to *6 and unmute yourself again, but feel free to jump in.
Well, it looks like he might be unmuting it. Oh, there we go. Awesome.
Hello.
Yep, we can hear you.
This is James.
Hi, James.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. When we first started, we were not just leaning on our indigenous knowledge, but looking at the biologist reports too, and sort of working in between. And but the indigenous knowledge that has been passed down to us, our river is 1,000 miles plus, including the tributaries, where the salmon harvest occurs. And one of our elders that had reminded us that was passed down to us from his elders was when we are harvesting salmon, think of the other people that are going to harvest the salmon way upriver from where you are collecting salmon, harvesting salmon. Think of those people too, so they can have share of the salmon, share of the harvesting the salmon while they are going up the river to spawn. And those are the knowledge that they had passed down to us, that we listen to. And the observations of our winter, the spring, the returning migration of the waterfowl, the birds, and our environment. Those are what has been passed down to us. And looking at our winter, this up to this date, it sometimes worries me because we have no snow. And if there's no snow, there wouldn't be enough water in the Kuskokwim River and the spawning tributaries, where the salmon won't be able to go up and return to their spawning grounds. But the elders used to remind us that if we are collecting salmon, harvesting salmon, think of the other people upriver too. And those are what we observe, and that is how we make schedules for our harvesting salmon, drifting, and set netting, so that there would be enough escapement as the summer goes by. Those, like I said earlier, our winter is worrying me of having no snow, and wouldn't have enough water this spring to fill up our rivers with melting snow. Keeping our fingers crossed that we might be getting some snow later on before the spring thaw arrives. Those are what we observe. And when we first started our Intertribal Fish Commission, that is what we worked with our indigenous knowledge and their the report of their biologists, and we compare, and we've been doing pretty good. We've been doing good with working with Intertribal Fish Commission and the Fish and Wildlife, which they sometimes pass down our knowledge and what we know to their upper people that are working outside the Kuskokwim. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks so much, James. And I wanted to say again, a huge thanks to the project team and all the panelists today for sharing their time and their perspectives and reflections on this really important work. Make sure to follow this work through the resources we shared earlier in the chat, but feel free to reach out to the project team directly or us at the Lenfest Ocean Program with any questions or requests for more information. Thanks again for coming. Thanks again for the project team, and we look forward to seeing you guys soon. Take care. Bye all.